Tonight on PrimeTime, tensions have surged overnight between Pakistan and Afghanistan after a series of cross-border airstrikes. Explosions were reported in multiple Afghan cities, a sharp escalation along a volatile frontier. Retaliation or something more? A very good evening. Pakistani fighter jets struck targets in Kabul, Kandahar and Paktia in the early hours of Friday. Well, Islamabad says the operation was a response to attacks along its shared frontier with Afghanistan, signalling a significant escalation between the two neighbours.
Pakistan says it's in open war with its neighbour Afghanistan. That's according to Pakistani Defence Minister Khawaja Mohammad Asif in a post on X on Friday. He declared that Islamabad's patience had run out as tensions escalated overnight, with both sides reporting heavy losses. Airstrikes were launched on several cities in Afghanistan in the early hours of Friday morning, including Kabul, Kandahar and Paktia. Officials said they were targeting Taliban posts, headquarters and ammunition depots. Islamabad accuses Kabul of harbouring Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan militants, a charge the Taliban-led government denies. The latest escalation comes after the Taliban launched retaliatory attacks on Pakistani border posts on Thursday. Speaking on Pakistan TV, Islamabad's information minister, Ataullah Tarar, said nothing justified the Afghan attacks.
That the Afghan Taliban regime has been harbouring terrorists. They have been protecting these terrorists, and by this unprovoked aggression earlier tonight, they have shown to the world that they are just there to protect these terrorists and promote them. Otherwise, there was no justification for this unprovoked aggression across the border tonight.
Afghanistan's Taliban government said the attacks it carried out on Thursday were launched in response to strikes by Pakistan earlier this week, which killed 18 people. Taliban spokesperson Wahidullah Mohammadi said the retaliatory operation focused on Nangarhar and Kunar provinces.
Dear compatriots, in response to the recent airstrikes carried out by Pakistani forces in Nangarhar and Paktia, heavy attacks have begun tonight at 8 p.m. in Nangarhar and Kunar provinces. Keep us in your prayers.
The fighting this week marks the most serious escalation between the neighbours in months and threatens a ceasefire along the two countries' 2,600-kilometre border.
Well, Afghanistan says it carried out retaliatory strikes against Pakistani military positions along the Durand Line. Islamabad, for its part, maintains it was responding to unprovoked attacks. Well, the clashes have now subsided, but tensions remain elevated. A News correspondent Tamim Bahis reports now from Kabul.
Fighting overnight along the Durand Line has left dozens reported dead, according to officials on both sides, before coming to a halt early this morning. Afghanistan's government spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid says Afghan forces began extensive retaliatory operations against Pakistani military centers following what Kabul describes as repeated aggression. Afghan officials report that around 55 Pakistani forces were killed in clashes, with some bodies transferred into Afghan custody. In a detailed statement, Afghanistan's Ministry of National Defense says the fighting began at 8 p.m. on February 26th and lasted about 4 hours. Afghan forces claim they targeted Pakistani positions near Paktika, Paktia, Khost, Nangarhar, Kunar and Nuristan provinces, killing 55 Pakistani soldiers, capturing 2 bases and 19 posts, and seizing weapons and equipment. They also report 8 Afghan fighters killed and 11 wounded. 13 civilians were said to have been injured in a strike on a refugee camp in Nangarhar. Pakistan is disputing that account. Its information ministry says Afghan Taliban forces opened fire on multiple points along the border in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, prompting what it describes as an immediate and effective response. Early Friday morning, Afghan officials also accused Pakistan of carrying out airstrikes in Kabul, Kandahar and Paktia provinces, though they say no casualties were reported. With sharply conflicting claims and no independent confirmation of casualty figures, the situation along the border remains volatile. Tamim Bahiz in Kabul, A News.
Okay, joining us first is Umair Jamal, correspondent at The Diplomat. Now, he's joining us from Lahore. He's been closely tracking security developments along the Pakistan-Afghan border and brings insight into how this latest escalation is being viewed inside Pakistan. Mr. Jamal, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Prime Time. It's good to see you there. Let's start with intelligence. How confident is Pakistan in the intelligence to justify the air operations?
Well, thank you for having me. To answer your question, it's not just Pakistan, I think. It's the whole world is saying, including the UN and other agencies reporting and warning that TTP and other militants, they enjoy high levels of freedom in Afghanistan, and that the group is fast becoming not just a threat for Pakistan, but a transnational threat. Last week, a UN report warned that Al-Qaeda and TTP, they are cooperating more closely, and that Al-Qaeda's strength in Afghanistan has grown recently significantly, as well as other groups. And just to add, another report from Russian Foreign Ministry recently warned, and it's a country that recognizes the Taliban regime, that overall the strength of militants in Afghanistan increased over 23,000 number, and half of them are foreign fighters. And Pakistan has shared this evidence with its bilateral partners. Pakistan has shared this evidence with other institutions, and has even after every attack it has gone to all institutions and said that this is happening and this is not stopping, and even shared with Afghan Taliban. But this has not made any difference from Pakistan's perspective, as Taliban continue to stick with their position that this is none of their business, this is Pakistan's internal matter, and that they have nothing to do with it. So I think to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of evidence. It's not just evidence coming out of Pakistan. It's evidence which is well documented that Afghan Taliban are supporting TTP as well as other groups. They according to one report, the chief of TTP, Wali Masood, he's paid more than $30,000 every month to sustain himself and his family in Kabul, where he's based. So all of this evidence points to one picture, that Pakistan had no other option but to resort to taking a very strong action after nothing else has worked.
Well, we've spoken about the politicians, the military leaders, the documented evidence, as you say. Where is the public on this? Where are people inside the country, not just in Islamabad, but throughout the country? What are their thoughts and feelings on this topic at this point?
Well, I think to begin with, they're well behind the country's armed forces, in the wake of this military action. And I think the view is in a sense that they see it as Pakistan doing something about the issue. For more than 3 years, Pakistan has taken thousands and thousands of casualties, and responded with by reasoning with the Taliban, by offering diplomacy, by offering trade incentives, by bringing in the third party intervention, but it has not worked. So even people in Pakistan, they are tired, they are exhausted by seeing attacks day in, day out. So in a way they are relieved that their state is doing something about it, and at the same time they're also concerned what happens after all of this episode finishes. Do we find a solution to this whole issue, or do we find more intensity in terms of attacks from TTP or Afghan Taliban? So it's a combination of both factors, but overall there's support for the military across the board, from opposition parties, from public at this hour. And I think as the military spokesperson said today, that the operation from Pakistan will continue until objectives are achieved. And I think there's nothing to suggest that public will not stand with their military.
And in terms of that solution that you touched on, what concrete steps is Islamabad taking to prevent these flare-ups from continuing?
So that's an interesting question because border with Afghanistan is not a small border. It's more than 2,000 miles of border, and Pakistan has taken made efforts during US's presence in Afghanistan to try to fence the entire border, but it's not a small job. It's a mountainous terrain. It's a very difficult region, but still to guard the entire border is not possible. One cannot deploy military everywhere. So part of the Pakistani strategy has been to intensify counter-terrorism operations across the federal tribal region, and also try to share information with the Taliban from time to time about it, regardless of whether they are willing to do something about it or not. But Pakistan in recent months has relied on maximizing its effort in terms of intelligence operations, counter-terrorism operations, and actions of that sort. But it seems that it has worked, but not in a way that Pakistan wants it to work, because the number of attacks has risen, the number of militants trying to cross border or crossing border into Afghanistan, that has also risen, and Taliban unfortunately are not willing to do something about it.
Mr. Jamal, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis and for joining us on the show. Thank you. Okay, our next guest now is Elham Neda, a member of the Afghanistan Sociological Association. Now, he's joining us from Cologne in Germany. He's been analysing the social and political dynamics shaping Afghanistan's response to the latest cross-border tensions. Elham, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. From Kabul's standpoint then, how serious was the damage caused by these strikes?
Thanks for having me. First, I would say that, first of all, let me just clear that Taliban is not a legit government in Afghanistan. And of course, right now, we are lacking a structured government. But however, we have to take a stand against the strikes. And there was losses, human losses in different parts of Afghanistan. You just mentioned a couple of cities, but it's more than 6 cities that was hit and that was been attacked, including Kabul, the capital, where we had human losses and also civilian losses. However, no official from the Pakistan government actually counted the civilian casualties, and they just marked the Taliban casualties. So I would say that first of all, it's like a attack on the territory of a country, and second one, it's the human losses which have happened inside Afghanistan, and especially in the capital.
One of the criticisms we keep hearing again and again from analysts all over the world is that the Taliban government just isn't getting to grips with the terrorism issue. Some people would say that it's a willful sort of lack of attention. Others would say that it's just the necessary difficulties of trying to hold a country together when you're relatively new in the role of governing. What's your attitude, your response to that sort of criticism?
So first of all, let me just clear that Pakistan has supported Taliban over the at least 3 decades, from their presence in 1995 until now, until 2021 when they came back to power. They have been supported by the Pakistan government, and especially the ISI, logistically and also technically. They had their trainings ground. Still, there were madrasas in Bajawar, in Akora Khatak. There's still the Quetta Shura, which is operating inside the Pakistan. So I would say, rather than having an eye on the Taliban, I would call the Pakistan government to have an eye and close the madrasas, which is operating inside the Pakistan, especially in Bajawar and Akora Khatak. However, of course, Pakistan has been dealing with the terrorism for a quite while, but it was the snake that they had in their backyard.
And what about third-party mediation? Clearly, tensions are running very high. Doesn't seem to be much common ground. Do you think it could be an opportunity now for a third-party actor to come in and help mediate?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like the very first country which came in negotiate between the two parties was Qatar, and afterwards Turkey was involved. However, there was no negotiation, or maybe let's say no results in the negotiations, which I would still say it was not because of lack of negotiator, but it was lack of technical support, which the Afghan government was taking. As I said before, Taliban are not the only kind of like people that are involved in structure in the Afghanistan. So the other parties has also get involved. And if they want to stabilize the region, then they have to involve different parties to get the negotiation done.
Okay, very interesting indeed. Well, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis and for joining us on Primetime. Thank you. Okay, we've heard from our guests then in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, Tehran is weighing in. Iran is urging both sides to return to dialogue, warning that any armed confrontation between its eastern neighbours could carry consequences far beyond their borders. A News correspondent Touraj Shiralilo reports now from Tehran.
Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi on Friday called for Afghanistan and Pakistan to resolve their differences through dialogue, offering Tehran's assistance to facilitate understanding between its eastern neighbors. In a post on social media X, he wrote, "It is appropriate for Afghanistan and Pakistan to manage and resolve existing differences within the framework of good neighborliness and through dialogue." He added that Iran is ready to provide any assistance in facilitating dialogue and strengthening understanding and cooperation between the two countries. Iran does not recognize the Taliban-led government in neighboring Afghanistan, but has maintained its diplomatic presence in the capital Kabul and exchanged delegations on bilateral issues. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai told the weekly press briefing on Monday that Iran will announce its decision on recognition of Taliban government when it comes to a final decision. He also warned that escalation of tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan will have repercussions beyond their borders. Last year, Tehran offered mediation between Islamabad and Kabul and hosted a meeting of Afghanistan's neighboring countries plus Russia. But authorities in Afghanistan decided to skip the key event. Touraj Shiralilo, Tehran, for A News.
Okay, we're joined now by Ali Hamadani, journalist and director of Persian Mix Radio. He's joining us from London. Ali, very nice indeed to see you. Good to have you on the show tonight. Why has Tehran chosen this moment in particular to speak out?
Well, we know that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been accused almost by the entire world and neighboring countries for basically being the main reason behind the instabilities in the region. The government establishment is trying to show that actually they are trying to mediate, and it matters to them what's going on in the neighboring countries, especially between Islamic Republic of Pakistan and the Taliban. So that's why right after the negotiations with the United States yesterday, Abbas Araghchi tweeted what he tweeted or posted on X, that Iran is willing to mediate between the Taliban and Islamic Republic of Pakistan. But I have to say, I was just trying to monitor social media inside Iran as well as Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I have to say the three nations were mocking what Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said. Iranians inside the country were saying, you are not capable of negotiating with the US government. You suppressed many protesters in Iran. How could you mediate between two other nations? Afghans were accusing Iran of basically fueling the ongoing conflicts in different from different aspects. And people in Pakistan were also talking about the fact that almost a year ago, Iran and Pakistan had also were involved in some sort of border conflicts. So I don't think it was received well in the region, while the Iranian establishment is trying to show that they still could play a role in the regional stability.
So the implicit accusation then is that it's an insincere engagement, that there's some nefarious alternative reason for engaging.
Well, remember that the Iranian supreme leader calls himself the supreme leader of the Muslim world, although Iran is a Shia country and the majority of Muslims are Sunni, but Ayatollah Ali Khamenei calls himself the supreme leader of the Muslim world. So that's where it is coming from. Iran is trying to show, the Iranian current regime, the establishment is trying to show that they have power in the Islamic world and they are trying to use that influence. But so many people are actually questioning if that is true at all.
And there's so much happening. You could argue this is the last thing that the region needs at the moment. So much happening across the region. Do you think that this tension, this conflict, it has the potential to completely reshape alliances?
It does, because remember, while President Trump is he's counting the number of wars he claims that he ended between Pakistan and India last year. Now there are other countries involved in this. We are talking about China, we are talking about Russia, we are talking about the Islamic Republic of Iran, Turkey and Qatar, which are trying very hard to say that actually they are trying to do it. And actually this could basically put all of these players in one basket. It could create a new alliance. While the United States is trying very hard to say that actually, as the most powerful government of the world and leader of the world, they are trying to do something everywhere. So I think actually, at least from what I can see, Islamic Republic of Iran is trying to say that it is trying to establish a better relations with its neighbors, including Turkey, Pakistan, the Taliban, and Iraq, Saudi, not only for the sake of its own benefit, but for the sake of the regional stability. So I think yes.
Ali, it's really great to have your analysis. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Primetime. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories of the day with Katie Wilson. Stay tuned.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
The global defense industry plays a vital role in ensuring national security. In Turkey, companies in this sector strengthen domestic production and enhance military independence.
ISA-based radar, Murat radar. This is fully digital radar. This is new for world. Aselsan today, Turkish technology leader and global technology provider.
I'm Nuray Mustafa. This is One on One.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. Now, time for business with Katie Wilson. Katie, what's on your agenda tonight?
Well, it's looking like the saga over Warner Brothers Discovery has finally come to an end. I'll have more on the stock market and the far-reaching effect of Trump's tariffs. Let's get started. First this evening, World Economic Forum President and Chief Executive Birger Brende is stepping down after the launch of an independent review into his past contact with late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Let's see more on that story.
President and CEO of the World Economic Forum, Birger Brende, said he was stepping down on Thursday after the forum launched an independent investigation into his relationship with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Brende, who has been the head of the WEF since 2017, announced his decision following disclosures from the US Justice Department that showed the Norwegian had 3 business dinners with Epstein. He had also communicated with the disgraced financier via email and text message. The former Norwegian foreign minister has said he was unaware of Epstein's past and criminal activities before first meeting him in 2018. He said he regretted not having investigated him more thoroughly. His statement made no mention of Epstein, but said the case risked drawing attention away from the forum's work. His resignation follows a series of revelations relating to Epstein, who in 2008 was convicted of soliciting prostitution from a minor.
Thank you.
In a separate statement, the co-chairs of the Geneva-based forum that organises the annual Davos summit said the independent review conducted by outside counsel into Brende's ties with Epstein had concluded. The findings stated there were no additional concerns beyond what has been previously disclosed, it added. The WEF's Alois Zvingi will serve as interim president and CEO, while the board identifies a permanent successor.
Now, it looks like the battle for Warner Brothers Discovery is finally at an end. Netflix is backing away from its bid for the media group's streaming and studio assets, saying a higher offer from Paramount Skydance has made the deal too pricey.
Netflix said on Thursday that it was backing out of its bid to buy Warner Brothers Discovery's streaming and studio assets. It comes shortly after Warner Brothers said a revised $31 per share offer from Paramount Skydance was superior to its existing deal with Netflix. In a statement, Netflix said, quote, "At the price required to match Paramount Skydance's latest offer, the deal is no longer financially attractive, so we are declining to match the Paramount Skydance bid." Netflix, which wanted to buy the Warner Brothers streaming and studio businesses, agreed in December to pay $27.75 a share, saying the offer, along with a planned spin-off of Warner Brothers cable assets, would deliver a greater shareholder value. Paramount, meanwhile, has argued it has a clearer path to U.S. regulatory approval. On Thursday, Paramount said it welcomed Warner Brothers board's unanimous reaffirmation that its bid represents the stronger offer.
Now let's get the latest from Wall Street. US stocks slipped on Thursday, with tech shares feeling the heat after Nvidia's latest earnings didn't quite wow investors. The Nasdaq led the losses, while other movers like Block and food manufacturer JM Smucker stole the spotlight.
U.S. stocks closed mostly lower on Thursday, with the Dow ending essentially flat, the S&P 500 shedding more than 0.5%, and the Nasdaq falling more than 1%. NVIDIA's fourth quarter results, posted after Wednesday's closing bell, were better than analysts expected, but the world's richest company by market cap wrestled with increasingly difficult year-over-year comparisons as its revenue growth decelerates. Its shares ended 5.5% lower. Eric Ditton is president and managing director of the Wealth Alliance.
Let's be clear, earnings up 94%. Let's be clear, this is a $5 trillion company. When you get big, you're supposed to slow down. You can't keep growing that fast, right? The law of big numbers. They continue to crush it. Data center revenue up 75%. Gross margin expanded, went up to 75%. Revenues up 73%, sequentially up 20%. These are numbers that are virtually unheard of. And yes, the stock is down over 5%. What is going on? Is this as good as it gets? That's what the market is asking.
Among other movers, shares of Jack Dorsey's Block soared more than 25% in extended trading after the payments firm said it will cut over 4,000 jobs, nearly half its workforce, as advances in AI reshape how it builds and runs its business. Outside of tech, shares of J.M. Smucker surged nearly 9% on the packaged food company's solid quarterly profit and sales estimates.
Over to the aviation industry now, and British Airways parent company IAG is flying a bit higher than expected. The airline group posted a solid annual profit, helped by lower fuel costs and strong demand on its premium transatlantic route, even as economy fares soften.
British Airways owner IAG reported better than expected annual profit on Friday. It's benefiting from lower fuel costs and resilience in core transatlantic routes and premium services. European airlines have been riding strong premium demand for flights across the North Atlantic and mirroring a sector-wide trend in which affluent travellers continue to spend, though US demand for economy fares softened. The group warned in November of weakness in the economy segment of the transatlantic market, sending its share price lower. They've recovered since, but IAG lost top spot for share price growth to Air France-KLM. IAG has been a European market leader in recent years with its bolstered transatlantic connections. However, price-sensitive flyers have pulled back in the face of tariff-related uncertainty and shifting US demand signals. IAG reported operating profit before exceptional items of $5.93 billion, slightly better than forecasts.
Over in tech, Workday shares took another tumble on Wednesday, hitting a more than 5-year low. The HR and payroll software company's weaker than expected sales forecast has investors worried about staying competitive in the AI era.
Shares of Workday spiraled to a more than 5-year low on Wednesday after a weaker than expected sales forecast fanned investor worries about whether the HR software company could stay competitive in the era of AI. Workday's recent rout has made it one of the worst performing U.S. software stocks this year. The drop in shares, down nearly 40% this year, has been fueled by concerns that AI tools launched by companies such as Anthropic would erode demand for traditional software. Workday CEO and co-founder Anil Bushri spent a large chunk of the post-earnings call on Tuesday trying to dispel those worries, saying, quote, "Just for what it is worth, Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI all run Workday's platform." He added that, quote, "No amount of AI-driven coding could replicate complex HR and payroll software." Still, about 26 analysts, more than half those covering the stock, lowered their price targets on the stock after Workday issued a softer-than-expected annual subscription revenue forecast. The company also said some large deals were taking longer to close, particularly in the government and healthcare sectors.
And finally, the effects of Trump's tariffs are being felt in places you might not expect. And today we're taking a closer look at the baby gear aisle. US tariffs on cots, prams and other essentials are driving up costs for young parents and forcing them to choose between price and safety.
The tariffs have had a major effect on all of us, and I'm particularly concerned about children.
Joe Shamey is the president of Delta Children's Products. The company is one of the largest US manufacturers of cribs, mattresses, and other juvenile furniture.
It's ready. 1, 2.
He brought Reuters on a tour of his New York testing facility, where he discussed the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs.
Tariffs increase cost. Tariffs create a situation where some parents will make the wrong choice and buy a used, old product that doesn't meet the current newest safety standard, or from a less reputable company.
He said young parents were affected by the levies, which have raised prices on items such as cribs, strollers, high chairs, and baby essentials.
The tariff on cribs is somewhere around 45%, which has really increased the cost significantly for a young parent. At the same time, our domestic production of mattresses and other products have also been affected because the parts that we import from various countries, Canada and Asia, have also been tariffed. So we have our domestic production has been affected, as well as our overseas manufacturing have been affected.
On Friday, the Supreme Court struck down tariffs imposed by Trump under an emergency law. But the president promptly promised a new 10% global duty, later vowing to raise it to 15%. Trump has always argued his tariffs will raise revenue and help revive US manufacturing. But the new levies could also face a legal challenge. And Shamey says the uncertainty over policy is tough for business.
The tariffs uncertainty, it's posed problems for our domestic manufacturing. We don't know how to produce them. We don't know how to price them. We're not sure. There's a lot of uncertain things.
Tough choices for parents there. That's your business news roundup for the day. Back to you, Guy.
Katie, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at Kazakhstan and Serbia strengthening ties during the Serbian president's visit to Astana. Stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome back to Primetime. Now, Kazakhstan and Serbia have agreed to deepen cooperation during the Serbian president's visit to Astana, signing 10 agreements and adopting a joint statement covering digital development, healthcare, science, investment and culture. Our correspondent reports now from Almaty.
Presidents of Kazakhstan and Serbia have agreed to move toward a closer strategic partnership. Talks between Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Alexander Vučić took place in Astana during the Serbian president's official visit. The visit began with a formal welcome ceremony at the Akorda presidential residence, followed by closed-door talks. This marks the fifth visit by a Serbian president to Kazakhstan overall, reflecting the continuity of high-level political dialogue between the two countries. Kazakhstan and Serbia have maintained diplomatic relations for 3 decades, and Serbia remains one of Kazakhstan's key partners in the Balkans. Economic ties continue to grow. Trade turnover exceeded $107 million last year, increasing by nearly 8%. Discussions focused on practical cooperation. Serbia retains expertise in the production and modernization of military equipment, armored vehicles and ammunition, and this is of interest to Kazakhstan, where much of the existing equipment requires modernization. At the same time, agriculture remains a central pillar of bilateral trade. The potential for Kazakh exports to Serbia is estimated at $250 million and will depend on business engagement and the terms of a free trade agreement. Astana also hosted the first Kazakhstan-Serbia Business Council. Around 10 memorandums were signed covering IT cooperation, food production and agriculture. Kazakhstan presented itself as a Eurasian transit hub, while Serbia positioned itself as a logistical gateway to Europe. And officials also showcased the National Digital Investment Platform, featuring more than 1,600 projects valued at over $120 billion. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Well, joining me now is top A News analyst and the host of Inside Politics, Anastasia Lavrina. Anastasia, really great to have you with us in the studio, as always. When you strip away the diplomatic sort of politeness, the formal statements, what's this really about? Is it about trade or also perhaps more of a sort of strategic calculation?
Well, I guess we have to understand that we live in a very fragile and unpredictable environment today. The global shifts, the processes, and therefore the countries are trying to build new relationships, being a part of those global processes, being a part of the international relations system, global organizations, members of the United Nations. Some of the countries, including Kazakhstan, decided to join a new initiative initiated by Donald Trump, Board of Peace. But at the same time, trying to concentrate the attention on the self-development and promotion the policy which will be built on the principles of mutual beneficial cooperations. Yes, geographically, two countries, Serbia and Kazakhstan, are quite far away from each other, but there are real perspectives for two states to increase the trade over. By the way, the experts highlighted that last year the trade over was equal to $100 million, meaning that there is a real perspectives for two countries increase the trade over in 2026 and then further. And indeed, there is a great potential two countries has. Serbia is taking a very important locations, geographical locations and position in Balkans, and Kazakhstan is an important country in the Central Asia. At the same time, the global transport links like the Middle Corridor or which is coinciding with the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Indeed, there is a potential to foster the, let's say, cooperation in trade environment, in energy sphere, and as some experts also highlighted, even the military and defense cooperation. Kazakhstan now is trying to update its military forces to, let's say, modernize its military equipment, and Serbia has such kind of potential, including the possibility to exchange the expertise. So yes, indeed, it may look like the countries signed so many cooperation agreements, starting from the economic cooperation, IT technology, let's say probably renewables in the future. It also will be highlighted. Education and tourism spheres was also highly discussed at the meetings. But all of these will definitely benefit from the geopolitical perspectives, making two mid-sized countries more independent, more, let's say, independent from the global processes, and will definitely benefit the political environment in two regions.
Now, Serbia has continued to nurture relationships both with Brussels and with Eurasia. Of course, those two great areas are not mutually exclusive. Of course, you can do that. But does that cause any tension, any challenges, do you think?
Well, indeed, formally, Serbia is pursuing EU accession. There is a procedure, but Serbia is not a member of the European Union yet. And there are some, let's say, skepticism about whether the country is going to join or not, especially taking into account the close ties with Russia. But we cannot ignore the fact that Kazakhstan is a reliable and good partner for many countries in the world, including the United States of America, including China, Russia, European Union, then Organization of Turkic States, meaning that the countries like Azerbaijan and Turkey are also developing quite intensively the cooperation with Kazakhstan. It means that Kazakhstan is indeed a very important partner for many countries in the world. And I don't think that they are the countries in the European Union even who will be so much dissatisfied with fostering the developments in between of Serbia and Kazakhstan, as they themselves may benefit from it in case of the successful implementation of a new transport links. Speaking about increasing the trade over between two countries, we cannot ignore the fact that the main limitations is an absence of the quite, let's say, properly functioning the transport links, the transport corridors, let's say, absence of any procedures, which definitely takes time from the entrepreneurs and others, businesses who are trying to increase the trade flows, not only from China, because Middle Corridor, it's not only about the trade flows from China to Central Asia, South Caucasus, now in case of successful implementation of Zangezur or so-called Trip Corridor to Armenia, Turkey and European Union. Another concern and a very important element of the future processes is how the products, the goods, will flow back from Europe with the same route to China. And if there is indeed very important infrastructure is built properly, Serbia may decide to join it and may become a real important partner for countries like Kazakhstan, providing an access to the goods to flow from Serbia through European Union further to the South Caucasus, Central Asia and probably to China. Therefore, I think that probably some policymakers who are still dissatisfied with the good relations between Serbia and Russia may express some skepticism about the successful cooperation and why Serbia should be concentrated on the let's say, cooperation development with the countries from Central Asia. But most of the European states will definitely support it. And we cannot ignore the fact that Kazakhstan, as a key element in the policy, in the processes of Central Asia, is also a member of C5+1, C6+1 projects together with the United States. Washington itself and Donald Trump, he mentioned many times that he likes Kazakhstan and willing to, let's say, promote the partnership. Again, coming back to what I said before, Kazakhstan joined Board of Peace Initiative, and I don't think that United States may decide to be abstain or somehow express a dissatisfaction. The same is happening with the European Union. Most of the countries in Europe already started to understand that they were wrong when they were against the Southern Gas Corridor, initiated and promoted by Azerbaijan, and now indeed becoming an important tool for energy diversification policy for helping the countries to survive if there is no alternative to export gas from Russia or any other country. The same is happening with the Middle Corridor, with the Zangezur Corridor, with the initiative of China, as in the future with the limitations in the north and south, with the problems Iran and United States having now, with the problems between Russia and Ukraine, let's say the war indeed on the large scale. Therefore, a new transport links and a new transport energy projects will be, I would say, welcomed by many European countries.
And what about the view from Kazakhstan? You know, as you say, the more people discover about the country, the more impressed they seem to be. 9th biggest country in the world, increasing geopolitical power, huge power and potential in the economy. Why would they look to a country like Serbia to start to form partnerships?
I guess Kazakhstan here and its future calculation rooted in connectivity and diversification, whether it comes from the energy perspectives, from the transport and logistic links, modification of its defense industry, the same as IT sphere and etc. Promoting the cooperation with the countries like China, fostering the trade routes and etc., fostering the processes with a smooth implementation of the middle corridor. And then, of course, I will say Astana indeed spends a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of financial resources to strengthen its identity as a transit and logistic hubs between Asia and Europe. More countries from Europe. Again, I would like to highlight it. Serbia, it's not a member of the European Union, but it has an intention to join the European Union. And Serbia has a good relations with the countries like Hungary, Romania, and etc. So even in Brussels, there are some voices who support the, let's say, the development, the future development of the relations between Serbia and the Brussels European Union. Therefore, here in Kazakhstan, there is a clear understanding that Serbia occupies an important geographic space within Southeast Europe. Then it also has ties across Balkans and Central Europe, as I mentioned. And beyond the logistics, I guess Serbia maintains, it's a unique country also as it maintains good working relationship with multiple global actors, including Russia, China, and the European Union. Russia and China, Kazakhstan has good relations as well. Here I would like also to refer to recent visit of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, to Serbia and signing new cooperation agreement. Two countries are indeed working very hard on the programs of renewables and energy products flow. Then Serbia actively supporting the stabilization and security processes in the region of the South Caucasus. And together, Kazakhstan, Serbia and Azerbaijan will work together in the future in a sphere like IT, where Azerbaijan has an experience and fostering relations with the countries like United States. During the visit of J.D. Vance, number of agreements had been signed. Then energy cooperation and the middle corridor. Azerbaijan is an important actor and also investing a lot, positioning itself and demonstrating all the capacities to be considered as a hub in between of the East and West, North and South. So here there's indeed, for the countries like Kazakhstan and Serbia, it's a part of multi-vector diplomacy. Policy, to being a part of the global processes, but at the same time to concentrate exclusively on the processes which benefit own peoples and populations in two countries, two states.
The strategic importance to both sides is very clear. The bilateral trade between Serbia and Kazakhstan is still relatively modest, but do you think that has much greater potential?
Before coming to the studio, I watched the analysis of many experts, both in Serbia and Kazakhstan, and all of them are highlighting that indeed there is a big limitations now. 100 million, it's not enough, taking into account the capacity, the geographical locations, and the intentions of the countries to move forward. Let's say Europe and Asia, great potential and new projects, but still the limitations in between. So yes, there is a potential, especially after this visit, to bring together the ministries, the organization, and the private sectors who can invest, who can promote the cooperation. And if we can, let's say, highlight the sectors where we may expect the intensification of cooperation in this year, we cannot ignore the fact that agriculture is one where Serbia has a good experience and where Serbia already export the food products and processed goods, while Kazakhstan is a major grain producer and fertilizer supplier. So industrial cooperation and the mentioned spheres have a potential to be the number to be increased in this year, but only if the, let's say, the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Logistics, the let's say structures dealing with the logistical development will also intensify. Having the goods potential is good, but the countries need the logistics and they need the transport communications and connections which will foster it, which will also benefit the entrepreneurs who are willing to send the products, but also need to have the properly established and built the transport links. So that's why probably when it was mentioned in the media, in a number of media, that President of Serbia is coming to Kazakhstan. Even before the meeting, the predictable was that logistics and transport are to be among the number one topics, among the priorities for two sides to discuss, and it's appeared to be like this.
Anastasia, what patterns are you noticing here? Because there's a lot going on in this region, in Central Asia, also as you move closer into Western Europe. Is there a trend here of sort of middle powers grouping together in increasingly innovative strategic ways in order to do more business with the great powers of the world?
Absolutely. Kazakhstan and Serbia are a mid-sized country, and even if they have the potential to be more notable in the global arena, we have to understand that the world is changing. I guess this is what, from where I started today's answers to your questions. The world is changing, and there is a new international relations system where the global powers are still looking for their for the opportunity to control the mid-sized countries. And even if from the geographical, from the strategic position, the locations of those countries are indeed very important for each and all processes in the world, it's not an exception, and it's not a secret that the global powers are still willing to take control over these new established projects and initiatives, whether it's China, Russia, United States, even the Brussels itself, willing to have its own presence in the regions in Balkans and Central Asia. Specifically in Central Asia, the region which is indeed now are changing significantly from the political, energy and trade perspectives. Therefore, two countries, mid-sized countries, but with a huge potentials, now are willing to build a partnership on a mutual beneficial base. They are not going to leave the global structures, the global institutions, international organizations like the United Nations, but still, when it comes to the bilateral relations, they are willing to have its own voice, they are willing to have its own role and contribution to be part of the global processes at the fair level, at the fair, to have these, to observe this fair attitude. And from the example of Azerbaijan, I will say Azerbaijan step by step built its image on the global arena, having its small voice, but now it's a possibility to take a part in the global processes. And it's time when the global actors, the, let's say, superpowers, are trying to build the relations with Azerbaijan, speaking the language of the perspective, cooperation, the fair, just cooperation. So for two countries, Kazakhstan and Serbia, it's also their willingness to be a part of global system, but also having the position when the global powers are referring to them with a just and fair attitude, as it's happening here. Azerbaijan is an example, but all three countries have a great potential to extend the partnership and cooperation, not in the bilateral, but on the trilateral level.
So much going on, Anastasia. That's why it's so important we get your forensic insight to make sense of it all. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at Denmark's snap election as Copenhagen recalibrates ties with Washington. Stay with us.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Denmark has decided to call early elections after US President Donald Trump's renewed interest in the Arctic island. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has called the snap elections as she looks to capitalise on rising support to redefine its relationship with the US.
Denmark is heading to a parliamentary election on the 24th of March, what is shaping up to be a high-stakes and potentially decisive vote centred on Greenland, global tensions and pressure at home. Danish Prime Minister Frederiksen called the election as her approval ratings climb, fueled by her firm response to renewed interest from US President Donald Trump in annexing Greenland. She has flatly rejected any suggestion of selling the Arctic territory and rallied European allies behind Denmark's sovereignty.
You know what I stand for. Whether I should continue to be your Prime Minister, that depends on how strong a mandate you give the Social Democrats. The parliamentary election will be held on March 24th, 2026, because much suggests that it will be a close election. It will be an important election. Yes. It will also be a decisive election because it will be in the coming 4 years that we as Danes and we as Europeans will truly have to stand on our own. We must define our relationship with the United States. We must rearm and secure peace on our continent. We must stick together in Europe, and we must secure the future of the Danish Commonwealth.
The dispute over Greenland has boosted her international standing, building on her COVID-era leadership and support for Ukraine. But at home, many voters are still worried about rising food prices, strained public services and inequality. The election will test whether Danes back her global leadership or punish her government for neglecting domestic issues. Her administration, a rare cross-party coalition formed in 2022 between Frederiksen's Social Democrats, the Liberals led by Defence Minister Troels Lund Poulsen, and the Moderates headed by Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, may struggle to keep its majority as traditional political divides return. With immigration also set to feature heavily, the vote will decide whether Denmark prioritises stability abroad or greater focus on problems at home.
Joining me now is Antonio Rollo Duarte, researcher and political analyst. He's joining us from Lisbon. Antonio, really good to see you. Thanks for joining us on Primetime tonight. Just give us the context, the sort of big picture on this, please, if you will. What's this election really about? Is it about domestic momentum, or is it more about Denmark reacting to signals from Washington?
Good evening. Well, we certainly can't disregard the international context in which this election is happening. The context is important, and Prime Minister Frederiksen, she certainly said that she's calling an election despite the international context, and that is a statement that she is making. She's building this narrative that regardless of President Trump's ideas for Greenland, ideas for Denmark more broadly, she's going ahead with domestic politics as usual. Now, this is a view that has been has brought her some popularity, and so when we look at the fact that she's calling an election now, she could have called an election for 6 months from now, but the fact that she's calling it now, we have to think about what the status of her popularity in Denmark is right now, in the context of the situation with the United States. And the situation is her popularity right now is very, very high compared to where it was 3-4 months ago. So she's polling at around 22%. Only a couple of months ago, she was 4 or 5 points less than that. Her party, the Social Democrats, had a very, very bad result in the local elections only a couple of months ago at the end of 2025. They lost the municipality of Copenhagen. That hadn't happened in 122 years. And so the situation for her and her party domestically is she's coming from a position of relative weakness at the end of last year. But then that position really built on, based on her reaction to Donald Trump's threats and to this situation involving Greenland. And so now that her popularity is high, she is clearly making the most of that to call that snap election and build on that momentum. So I would say, in response to your question specifically, I would say that this election, it hasn't been called as a reaction to the situation with the United States, but it's certainly been called in the context of that situation, and very much building that narrative that it is being called despite what is coming from abroad. So kind of asserting that position of strength, which she has seen really brings her a lot of popularity in her country.
It's very interesting indeed. So this great battle with the world's biggest superpower is actually playing well for her, at least in the short term, domestically. Who is winning, if it's possible to diagnose that, who is winning the great game of chess that's going on between the US, between Washington and Copenhagen at the moment? Because to some degree, it looks like Copenhagen's being drawn into a difficult debate that it doesn't really want to have.
Yes, we could say that it's been that Denmark is being drawn into a geopolitical contest in the Arctic, which it didn't really choose. That said, there is also a history. We can't say that it's completely unexpected. We can, of course, thinking of the rules-based international order that we've had for so long, and the respect that there is between mutual Western allies, we can certainly think that it is somewhat unexpected for these kinds of statements to come from the United States. But we can't say that the interest of the United States in Greenland specifically is entirely unexpected. And I say this because there is a history of American interest in the area. And this goes back at least to the 19th century. When the US bought Alaska in 1867, the Secretary of State at the time, a man called William Seward, he explored the idea of acquiring Greenland all the way back then in the 19th century. Later on, at the beginning of the 20th century, right, around 1910, again that idea resurfaced again, and American diplomats they certainly discussed this possibility very, very seriously. And then again, militarily, the relationship has been big. During the Second World War, there were U.S. bases in Greenland that were used to a very great extent. This is to say, we could go through the various steps of the American relationship with Greenland specifically. We don't want to go into too much depth on that. But this is to say that there has been this relationship over time. And when we think about who is winning the game of chess, well, we also have to think about how the game of chess has been played for longer than what it might seem. So this might be a longer game. And it might not end here either. This might be, just another chapter in a very long story, even though it might seem like it is, to us living it right now, it might seem like an enormous and kind of singular chapter. Well, I would say it is one chapter of a larger story.
And very, very interesting. And just to extend your analogy, if we move into now the next chapter of that story, do you think that security interest by the US in Greenland could evolve into something that really provides much more leverage for Denmark, actually puts Denmark in a much more powerful position?
See, I think that's a very, very interesting question, Guy, because it is kind of flipping the question around and thinking, okay, could Denmark see the size that this issue has gained and the issue itself? Could Denmark see this issue as an opportunity? Could it see it as an opportunity for its foreign policy? For its, I mean, we've seen that the Prime Minister is capitalizing on it domestically as well. But could Denmark see this as an opportunity to gain leverage on the international field? And I think a bigger question than that as well is, could Europe see this issue as an opportunity? Because we know, we've realized how much Greenland is an asset. We've realized how much Greenland matters in the geopolitics of today. Thinking about the Arctic, etc. We can go there in a minute if we have time. But we've also now realized that, or it's become certainly very clear, that it's not just Denmark, or it's not just Europe that see Greenland as an asset. There are other powers who see Greenland as an asset. And when we think about this, we could think, is this something that Europe more broadly should be discussing? And when we think about whether this response to the situation, to the importance that Greenland has acquired in global politics today, when we think whether how the response should be, one of the questions I think to be asked is, should this response be primarily Danish, or should it be only Danish, or should there be a bigger European response? We know that militarily NATO has a role to play for sure, but politically, should there be a bigger European role politically in discussing Greenland? And let me say one thing about this, is that the big challenge, I think, politically, at a European level, to deal with this question goes back to domestic politics, and goes back to the domestic policies of many European countries today in approaching international issues in general, and whether the approach to prefer is one that is based on a more Europeanist, more multinational or even supranational approach to international affairs, or should we go back to nation first and a more nationalist, a more sovereign-based, kind of state-led approach to international politics? And when we think about Greenland, I think this is a very interesting question, is to what extent should Denmark be thinking about Greenland by itself and about its own national matters? Or should Denmark also be really kind of seeing Greenland as an opportunity to drive the European collective effort further, right? And we see this when we think about the state of domestic politics in so many European countries today. I'm based in Portugal, of course, and in Portugal we have this discussion happening right now with the emergence of a political party, as in so many other countries in Europe, who, in this case, Chega in Portugal, who has a view of international politics much more based on, nationalism and the nation first and sovereignty, and going back to what we associate with kind of 19th century and 20th century values, or earlier 20th century values. I think is this the question for Danish society right now? Should we, go further to that what we are calling nowadays the populist right, or the nationalist right, or the sovereignty focused right, in addressing global issues like the relationship with America over Greenland? Or should we defer to international institutions, European institutions, a bigger role for the European Union? So I think this is a question that certainly is Danish, but can also be much broader. And I think it's an opportunity for Denmark to think, do we want to go our own way here? Or do we also want to participate in leading Europe in addressing these kind of issues collectively? And that would be my point on that. It's
a very interesting point. You mentioned Chega there, like many other parties on the populist right, not huge fans of multilateral organisations, traditional multilateral organisations, to put it mildly. What about NATO in all of this? I mean, we've seen Mark Rutte exhaustively, meeting so many people all around the world, trying to mediate, to solve these problems wherever possible. Where is the sensitivity at the moment in NATO with regards to this issue?
What about NATO indeed, Kai? What about NATO? What about NATO? What about the UN? What about the role for these big international, supranational organizations which have gain such, in the case of NATO, a military alliance, really, but also an international organization. These organizations that have gained such a big role in global politics, especially since 1945, and which now see their place and their support challenged. I mean, I was just speaking today with a Western diplomat who works at the United Nations, and he was telling me the concern within the United Nations right now is incredible for the future of the institution itself and for how it will operate. He was telling me that whenever American diplomats walk into a room, that the anxiety level, the temperature of the room goes up. This used to happen, he said, this is a Western diplomat. He says, this used to happen when the Russians walk into a room or when the Chinese. He says, nowadays this happens when the Americans go into the room. And of course, we know how America has pulled funding away from the UN. We know how their support for military alliances like NATO, as you mentioned, and rightly so, is dwindling, or at least is certainly being put into question. And so there is certainly, I think, a bigger question here about not just NATO specifically, although NATO is very important, as you say, and as well, not the UN specifically, although the UN can also be important and can have a role to play. But it's a bigger question about the role of international organizations in the world order as we turn into what seems to be, certainly from a historical perspective, and I do a lot of research on contemporary history, it certainly seems to be a new chapter in international politics. Again, I perhaps go back to my point about the relationship between Greenland and America, perhaps another chapter in a very long story, but we'll certainly be following that and see what comes out of that.
And finally, Antonio, I just want to ask you, in this great battle, power struggle in the Arctic, who's holding the best cards, do you think, at the moment? Is it Washington? Is it Copenhagen? Is it Greenland itself? Or is it perhaps Russia? We haven't spoken much about Russia yet. Who do you think is in the strongest position?
We haven't spoken much about Russia, and we haven't spoken much about China either. And especially when we think about the geopolitics of the Arctic nowadays, these are America, Russia, China. These are three players that we can't leave out of the conversation. It's a very tricky situation in the Arctic, which has been evolving. It's certainly often been happening under our radar. Us who also discuss things in the media often don't go there maybe as often as we should. But over the last 20 years or so, the Arctic has really been a focal point more and more for these great powers. Now, who holds the cards, as you ask? Well, I would say that in international politics, power, as power anywhere in human societies, really, is diluted, and we can't say that one of these powers, in the case of a medium-sized power like Denmark, or these bigger powers like America, China, and Russia, we can't say that one of them has all the cards in their hand, or I wouldn't even say they have the biggest cards. I think several or all of them have interesting cards to play with, and if they play them well, that could bring very good results indeed. I think Denmark has some very interesting cards to play here. I think maybe deferring back to the point I was making earlier, the fact that it has such a strategic area there, certainly in the upcoming geopolitical tensions that there will continue to be, as far as we can see, between America, Russia, China, etc. Certainly has some very good cards there to play if it wants to assume a bigger role in international politics. Of course, America has the biggest military cards to play with for now. Of course, we know military capabilities increasing elsewhere as well. We know certainly Russia, a big presence in the Arctic for as long as anyone can remember, has the local expertise for sure, bases in Siberia that are very well equipped to deal with anything concerning the Arctic. I mean, this is, to answer your question as specifically as I can, although I don't have one single answer here. I would say that power is very much diluted among great powers, but also amidst smaller regional powers who might have a say in these bigger questions in the geopolitics of the Arctic in coming years.
Fascinating stuff indeed. Antonio, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis. Thank you. After the break, we'll take a look at the Druzhba pipeline dispute and the competing claims over disrupted oil flows. Stay with us.
The global defense industry plays a vital role in ensuring national security. In Turkey, companies in this sector strengthen domestic production and enhance military independence.
ISA-based radar, Murat radar. This is fully digital radar. This is new for world. Aselsan today, Turkish technology leader and global technology provider.
I'm Nuray Mustafa. This is One on One.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has accused Ukraine of undermining Europe's energy security by halting oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline to Hungary and Slovakia. Kyiv, however, says the infrastructure was damaged by Russian strikes in late January and has not yet been repaired.
No doubt these actions threaten the energy security of these countries, Hungary and Slovakia, and of the European continent as a whole. This Kyiv regime actions has understandably provoked outrage of the Hungarian and Slovak authorities, who view the regime's actions as a direct infringement on their sovereignty. In this context, the lack of an appropriate response from European institutions, which are supposed to protect the interests of their member states, and the absence of any reaction to the Ukrainian attacks on the Druzhba oil pipeline are hardly surprising.
Okay, joining us now in the studio is A News' Andy Mioch. He's been following these developments closely and can take us through what we know so far. Andy, very good to see you. Let's start with the basics then. What do we actually know about the current status of this pipeline?
Well, oil's not flowing through Druzhba, and it hasn't been since January 27th. Supplies to Hungary and Slovakia, the only two European Union countries that continue importing Russian oil, were halted due to damage on the pipeline that Ukraine blamed on Russian drone strikes. Ukrainians are saying that repair work is underway, but Budapest and Bratislava are accusing Kyiv of deliberately blocking oil supplies through the pipeline for political reasons. We've heard Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban calling it a Ukrainian oil blockade, alleging it's aimed at driving up fuel prices in his country ahead of the parliamentary elections in Hungary set for April 12th. He claimed, without providing any evidence, that Ukraine wants to see him lose that vote. By the way, polls are not looking good for Orban at the moment. Hungary then went on Monday to veto the critically important 90 billion euro EU loan for Ukraine. They blocked the new sanctions package on Russia, and that was, of course, condemned by Ukraine and most of European leaders. Now, when it comes to Slovakia, Prime Minister Robert Fico said the stalled oil supply was a, quote, purely political decision aimed at blackmailing Slovakia over its international positions on the war in Ukraine. Bratislava, in response, halted emergency electricity supplies in Ukraine, saying that that measure would be taken off the table as soon as the oil starts flowing through the Druzhba pipeline again. Fico and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky spoke today, and all that we've got from that phone call was Zelensky's office saying that Zelensky invited him to Ukraine to come and for them to talk about all existing issues between the two countries.
Accusations flying around, accusations as you'd expect coming from Moscow too. Moscow saying that Kyiv is deliberately threatening European energy security. I mean, how credible is that claim?
Well, I can say with a lot of certainty that many, especially in Europe, would see these accusations by Russia that anyone is jeopardizing European security as highly cynical. Croatia has already said that it can deliver oil supplies to Hungary and Slovakia to replace all those quantities that are now not coming through the Druzhba pipeline, through its Adriatic pipeline. Croatia's Prime Minister Andrej Plenković said on Thursday that Jadranski Naftovod, or JANAF, that Adriatic pipeline, has the full capacity to ensure uninterrupted oil supply for both Hungary and Slovakia. He said that the capacity of refineries in those two countries owned by Hungary's MOL group stands at 14 million tons, while the Adriatic pipeline can transport 15 million tons per year. Now, the question here is whose oil exactly is the problem here, because Slovakia and Hungary, for obvious economic reasons, want Russian oil, which is a lot cheaper than the oil of that other EU member states are getting since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. On February 20th, the JANAF operator, the one in Croatia, said that, quote, a significant quantity of non-Russian crude oil is being transported via JANAF's pipeline for MOL Group, while 3 additional tankers carrying also non-Russian oil are on their way this week. This Croatian company said that by early April, 7 additional tankers with non-Russian oil for the same user are expected. The European Commission has said on Wednesday that Croatia is assessing whether it can lawfully import seaborne Russian crude oil and send it on via the Adriatic pipeline onto Hungary and Slovakia. We then heard from Hungary's MOL group that called on Croatia's JANAF to provide guarantees for the passage of Russian oil. In an ultimatum of sorts, they said that if these guarantees are not provided, they would take the matter up with the European Commission and possibly initiate compensation proceedings. And finally today, a European Commission spokesperson said that it is up to Croatia to decide whether it wants to allow the Russian oil through the Adriatic pipeline or not.
Andy, Ukraine says that this damage was caused by Russian strikes in late January. Is there any independent verification to back that up?
Well, as it's a war zone, not really. But Hungary and Slovakia have come out with a joint proposal to establish a fact-finding mission to go out there in the field and assess the damage to the pipeline itself. Orban sent a letter on Thursday asking the European Council to establish such a mission, suggesting it could help unblock that new EU funding for Ukraine. It's still unclear whether Kyiv would allow for such a mission to take place, to go to that Lviv region where the damage allegedly happened, as it has previously warned that technicians are at risks from Russian attacks while they are there on the ground.
Hungary and Slovakia then clearly very angry about this. If disruption is sustained. What is the impact? What does it look like for those two countries?
Well, let's just have a look at the facts and the data. Even though the EU imposed an embargo on imports of Russian seaborne oil in 2022 and on imports via the northern branch of the Druzhba pipeline in 2023, its southern branch, the one in question that goes to Hungary and Slovakia, remained outside the sanctions regime that allowed Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic to still legally import Russian crude. Prague has since stopped buying, but Bratislava and Budapest have used that sanctions exemption to retain all those deliveries. According to the European Council on Foreign Relations, as of November last year, Hungary and Slovakia still rely on Moscow for from 86 to 100% of their oil supply. Now, as I mentioned a bit before, Russian oil comes a lot cheaper than other alternatives. However, the option to import something else is always on the table. Just take a look at the Croatian offer. The Croatian PM said his country is there as a, quote, neighbor, partner, and friend to ensure the energy security and smooth functioning of the economies of both Hungary and Slovakia.
Very interesting indeed. Strategically, there's been a lot of talk inside Brussels about energy dependence, obviously in the war in Ukraine. Does this muddy the waters somewhat? Does it make life for the EU in that regard more difficult?
Well, we've seen that Hungary blocked what was maybe the biggest achievement of the few recent EU summits, that massive 90 billion euro loan that would allow Ukraine to fulfill its military and civilian budgetary commitments. That new sanctions package on Russia is also on hold, but we've seen nothing new in essence when it comes to the position of individual EU member states. Perhaps the most blunt were the Polish. Foreign Minister Radoslav Sikorski called Budapest's move to block these two things shocking, given that Budapest was itself invaded in the 20th century by Soviet troops. He said Orban's anti-Ukrainian rhetoric was aimed at domestic audiences ahead of that April election.
Yeah, very interesting stuff indeed. Andy, always great to get your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Do stay with us.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to Primetime. Now to our correspondents around the world. Georgia's European trajectory is under renewed pressure after Brussels warned that visa-free travel to the EU could be suspended for its citizens. Our correspondent reports now from Tbilisi.
The European Commission has confirmed that it has already partially suspended visa facilitation for Georgian diplomatic and service passport holders. In a letter to the Georgian opposition dated February 25, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen outlined deep concerns over what the EU describes as systemic and deliberate regression in governance, rule of law, anti-corruption efforts, and visa compliance. Under the EU's visa suspension mechanism, this is only the first phase. If Georgian authorities fail to address the identified shortcomings, the second phase could extend visa requirements to all Georgian citizens, effectively suspending the visa-free regime granted in 2017. The Commission has also called for the release of journalists, activists, and individuals it considers unjustly detained. At the same time, EU member states are discussing possible sanctions against those viewed as responsible for democratic backsliding. No unanimous decision has been reached yet, but negotiations are ongoing. The Georgian government rejects claims of democratic regression and maintains that it remains committed to its European integration path. Still, the stakes are concrete. Visa-free travel to the Schengen area has allowed millions of Georgians to travel for tourism, study, and business without bureaucratic barriers. If the suspension expands, the impact will not be symbolic. It will be felt at airports, consulates, and border crossings. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
To Turkey next, and the jailed PKK leader has again urged the group to end its armed campaign, calling for a political transition and legislative steps from Ankara. A-News's Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
Abdullah Öcalan, the imprisoned leader of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, issued a statement on Friday in which he repeated calls for the group to end its decades-long armed insurgency against the Turkish state. The message was read aloud by representatives of Turkey's pro-Kurdish Dem Party. In the statement, Öcalan said the PKK was ready to move from what he described as the politics of violence toward democratic politics and integration. But he also called on Ankara to pass legislation aimed at ensuring what he described as a transition to democratic integration in Turkey. The statement coincided with the first anniversary of Öcalan's earlier appeal for the PKK to disband and lay down its arms. Turkish authorities have responded to that call by pledging legislative reforms designed to expand Kurdish political participation and address long-standing grievances. Last week, Turkey's parliament adopted a legal framework intended to guide the ongoing peace process and the reintegration of former PKK militants into society. The framework called for democratic reforms to proceed in parallel with reciprocal steps by the PKK to disband and surrender its weapons. In Friday's message, Öcalan also stressed the need for what he described as a legal framework encompassing political, social, economic, and cultural dimensions. Despite the ongoing peace process, the PKK is still viewed as a terrorist group by Turkey, the European Union, and Washington. For decades, the group waged a violent insurgency against Turkey, in which tens of thousands of people, both civilians and military personnel, were killed. This is Adam Ara for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
To Central Asia next, Kyrgyzstan and the European Union have agreed a draft roadmap aimed at removing Kyrgyz banks from sanctions lists following restrictions linked to alleged sanctions evasions activities. A News correspondent Sevil Rajapova reports.
Kyrgyzstan is now working with the European Union on a roadmap to address sanctions that have affected parts of its banking sector. The move comes after the European Union added two Kyrgyz banks, Tolubay Bank and Eurasian Savings Bank, to its Russia-related sanctions list in October 2025. The decision followed talks between Deputy Prime Minister Daniyar Mangildiev and European Union sanctions envoy David O'Sullivan. The European Union's 19th sanctions package banned those institutions from conducting transactions with European counterparties and effectively cut them off from accessing key international financial channels, including correspondent banking services. These measures have complicated cross-border trade and remittances and are based on concerns that certain financial operations might have been used to circumvent sanctions imposed on Russia by the European Union and its partners. In addition to Tolubay and Eurasian Savings Bank, other Kyrgyz financial entities such as Karamat Bank and Capital Bank of Central Asia have faced sanctions from the United States and the United Kingdom earlier in 2025, linked to similar concerns. Under the new cooperation, Kyrgyz and European Union officials plan to enhance transparency, strengthen risk management systems, and establish clear criteria that could eventually lead to the phased removal of restrictions. The European envoy emphasized that the sanctions are intended to prevent their evasion, not to isolate Kyrgyzstan, and that constructive dialogue could help facilitate adjustments where warranted. Lifting sanctions could help restore international banking links and ease pressure on Kyrgyz businesses and remittances. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
And here in Azerbaijan, a new Khojaly genocide memorial has been inaugurated, honouring the victims of the 1992 massacre as reconstruction continues across the town. A News correspondent Gulchin Hojaleva reports now from Khojaly.
The newly inaugurated Khojaly Genocide Memorial now stands at the heart of Khojaly, serving as a permanent tribute to the victims of the 1992 tragedy that claimed hundreds of civilian lives and left a lasting mark on the nation's memory. The memorial was opened on Thursday with the participation of Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and First Lady Mehriban Aliyeva. Established under a presidential order signed in 2025, the complex is dedicated to preserving the memory of the victims and conveying historical truths to future generations. Its design combines symbolism and reflection. Exhibition halls present photographs, documents, and multimedia installations that tell the human stories behind the tragedy. Families destroyed, lives cut short, and community forever affected. Almond trees planted in the courtyard bloom at the end of winter, symbolizing remembrance, hope, and a continuing call for justice. Beyond the memorial, Khojaly and surrounding areas show visible signs of revival. Homes are being restored, schools and community facilities rebuilt, roads and utilities upgraded, and families are returning to reclaim their ancestral lands. Public spaces and natural areas are also being revitalized, reflecting not only reconstruction, but the gradual return of everyday life. In Khojaly, the memorial preserves the memory of the past, while the returning residents and restored neighborhoods stand as living proof of resilience and renewal. From Khojaly, this is Gulchin Hojaleva with Zohrab Shirinov for A News.
Okay, let's turn now to some of the other stories making the headlines. Former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has told a congressional committee examining the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein that she never met him and had no knowledge of his criminal conduct. Her husband, former President Bill Clinton, is due to testify later today.
Behind closed doors, the former First Lady of the United States, Hillary Clinton, met with lawmakers in New York over her links with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein on Thursday. She said she had no information to share about his criminal activities.
Well, I have just finished testifying. I answered every one of their questions as fully as I could, based on what I knew, and what I knew is what I said in my statement this morning. I never met Jeffrey Epstein, never had any connection or communication with him. I knew Ghislaine Maxwell casually as an acquaintance, but whatever they asked me, I did my very best to respond. I don't know how many times I had to say I did not know Jeffrey Epstein. I never went to his island. I never went to his homes. I never went to his offices. So it's on the record numerous times.
The deposition had to be paused briefly when a leaked photo of Clinton appeared online by Republican Senator Lauren Boebert. Boebert says she does not recall sending the photo.
You sent that picture? I just returned to my hotel room and installed the BleachBit software and took a camera to my iPad. So I guess in regards to any photos, I do not recall.
House Oversight Chairman James Comer said the deposition went well.
And I think that this was a productive deposition today. I think we learned a lot. There were a lot of questions that we asked that we weren't satisfied with the answers that we got, but we will continue to move forward. Any of my colleagues, every member of the committee asked questions. And
former President Bill Clinton is scheduled to testify on Friday. He's denied wrongdoing and expressed regret for his association. Committee Chair James Comer said there are currently no allegations of wrongdoing against the Clintons.
Diplomatic efforts over Iran's nuclear program appear to be inching forward, albeit slowly. Officials in Washington, Tehran and Muscat have pointed to progress, but talks in Geneva ended without a breakthrough. Further negotiations are set for Vienna next week.
Nuclear talks between the United States and Iran in Geneva have been described as positive, according to a US official. The negotiations in Switzerland brought together President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi. Oman has been mediating contacts between the two sides as efforts continue to revive diplomatic engagement over Iran's nuclear program. Although the overall tone was described as constructive, it's reported that the US side had been disappointed with Iran's positions during the morning session. The two sides plan to resume negotiations after consultations in their respective capitals, with technical-level discussions scheduled to take place next week in Vienna. That's according to Omani Foreign Minister Saeed Badr al-Busaidi in a post on X after the talks concluded. We have finished the day after significant progress in the negotiation between the United States and Iran, the Omani Foreign Minister wrote. Earlier, a senior Iranian official told Reuters that the two sides could reach a framework agreement if Washington separates nuclear and non-nuclear issues. Speaking later in the evening, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said Tehran and Washington had moved closer to agreement.
We made good progress and very seriously entered into the elements of a possible agreement, both in the nuclear field and in the area of sanctions. On some issues, we have now become very close to an understanding. On certain other issues, we still have differences of opinion. The technical teams will begin technical talks in Vienna on Monday at the International Atomic Energy Agency. And with the assistance of the agency's experts, we will try to bring some of the technical issues into a framework so that it can later be aligned with the political demands of both sides.
He added that a further round of negotiations will be held in less than a week. No joint statement from the United States or Iran was immediately released.
The 13th session of the World Urban Forum, due to take place in Baku in May, will offer a chance to assess progress, identify remaining gaps and shape priorities for the decade ahead. Next year also marks 10 years since the new urban agenda was adopted in Quito.
Ensuring the maximum level of efficiency in terms of preparation for this.
Housing the world, safe and resilient cities and communities. This slogan reflects one of the most urgent global challenges today: how to provide adequate, affordable and climate-resilient housing for a rapidly growing urban population. Nearly 3 billion people worldwide are estimated to lack access to safe, adequate housing. Cities are expanding, climate risks are increasing, and inequality continues to shape urban development. Against this backdrop, World Urban Forum 13, which will be hosted in Baku in May 2026, aims to place housing at the center of the global urban agenda. Organizers and UN Habitat representatives outlined how Azerbaijan is preparing to host this major global platform, which will bring together governments, urban planners, international organizations, and civil society to discuss practical solutions for safer and more resilient cities.
This year, at the United Nations and globally, we would also be looking at progress with implementing Sustainable Development Goal 11. Sustainable Development Goal 11 is a commitment by the world to promote sustainable cities, sustainable communities for a better urban living and better urban future. And we will be reviewing progress. So the World Urban Forum is very significant for that as well. Finally, for us at UN Habitat, the World Urban Forum will be a very important vehicle to set the tone and to inform the implementation of our next 4 years. At UN Habitat, for the next 4 years, we have a new strategic plan. We'll be focusing on housing, collaborating with all relevant actors and stakeholders to promote adequate housing for everyone, everywhere.
Today, urbanization is accelerating rapidly. According to international forecasts, by 2050, nearly 70% of the world's population will be living in urban areas. While urbanization creates broad opportunities for economic development, improved quality of life, and new prospects, it also generates serious social, environmental, and infrastructure challenges for cities. Addressing these challenges requires complex and long-term approaches. For this reason, ensuring people's well-being, social justice, and decent living conditions has become one of the central issues of the global urban agenda. At the same time, the implementation of new urban planning models in the liberated territories and the application of modern urbanism approaches provide an important platform to present Azerbaijan's experience in this field to the international community.
Preparations are already underway. Organisers introduced the Baku's digital platform, described as a digital gateway to WUF 13 Azerbaijan, designed to provide information on participation, tourism, media resources, and sustainability features. Forum is expected to bring together governments, subnational authorities, urban planners, private sector actors, civil society and academia, creating a rare space for structured dialogue between public and non-government stakeholders. World Urban Forum 13 aims to shift the conversation from awareness to action. The central message is that housing is not only about shelter, it is about stability, opportunity, resilience.
Well, that's all for Prime Time for tonight, and indeed for this week. Please do join us again on Monday for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, have a great weekend.